To summarize the story, Savta described how ubiquitous, that means how absolutely present in every part of her young life, was the anti-Semitism that she was exposed to. The signs forbidding the entrance of Jews and dogs, were everywhere. And she noticed that somehow her pride didn't prevent her from going right into those stores. She went into the candy store that said Jews not permitted, and she got her candy. And she went into where the optometrist, who himself was a Jew, who needed to put a sign on his door, that on his entrance, that no Jews were allowed. It's a little bit ironic. And it was everywhere. And so that was the essential message, was that these were the extreme messages of hatred towards Jews that became that really became so commonplace that she did what she could to avoid it, in the sense that she asked her parents if she could be enrolled in the Jewish school, and that they shouldn't try to put her into the public school. I don't know whether there really was an option. She was a little girl. Jews, I think, at that point were already forbidden from the public schools. But in any event, she avoided the anti-Semitism by looking forward to being in the Jewish school. And wherever she went, that she particularly mentioned the beach that they would frequent during the summers, where again there were signs that disallowed their coming. And apart from the fact that there were some German boys who shooed them away, they would not have even paid attention. It was just all around them. So I want to just make one or two small points about this. It's the first, perhaps, is that Amalek and hatred for Jews is not the exception, it's the norm. That's a very important point to internalize, that Hashem wove Amalek into the world as part of the system that guarantees that we will ultimately reach Geula. So let's make sure that we're clear on what that means. There are two things in the world that don't go together. One is free choice, and the other is a guarantee of tshuva and geula. Those don't go together, because if you have free choice, then in theory you could never reach the point of doing tshuva and being redeemed. So in order to sustain these two apparently contradictory ideas, there needs to be a system in place that gets us back into our lane. We've mentioned it before, but it's important to recognize it here. That is part of Amalek's job. And the reason I say it's only part, because every difficulty that we have in our lives is meant to prod us to tshuva, to request more intimately from Hashem. Every good thing that happens is meant to bring us closer to Hashem as Avinu. So the system is designed to always be giving us prodding and reminder so that we will get to the finish line. The goal is to get to the finish line. The goal is not to fail. The goal is to succeed. And in order to get to the finish line, you need the world has to allow for the possibility of things prodding us. And now that doesn't mean that it takes away choice, But ultimately, in the end of the day, the affliction will remove choice. Choice is as long as you can use it. If you can't use it anymore, it's not useful. And so affliction or difficulty or challenges are necessary if you don't have another option in order to get to the end zone. So Savta was a child, and she did not know how to interpret the existence of anti-Semitism all around her. We are required to recognize that the one thing you don't ever want to do in your life is get used to something that's less than perfect. Now, watch, that's a tricky statement. Don't ever get used to something that is less than perfect. So, well, that's an invitation for anger, right? And the answer is it could be if you misuse it. But if you recognize it as a prod towards where we're meant to go, then it becomes a tool or an instrument for recognizing that Hashem is Avinu and Malkeinu. So again, don't make peace with anything that isn't perfect in your life. Because whatever it is, no matter how small it is, as Chazal say, even if somebody reached their hand in the pocket and pulled out the wrong change, use it. Because to not use it in that positive sense of, here's a reminder, Shivtecha umishantecha, hema yinachamuni, that both when Hashem gives us support and when he gives us the staff, both of those comfort us because they bring us closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu if we use them properly. If we don't use them, if we fail to use them properly, the Rambam refers to that as achzarios. That's cruel, because what that does is it invites yet a more extreme expression of the signal to get back into our lane. That is because we are guaranteed of the outcome, which is tshuva and redemption. So what happened in a world where the small signals were being ignored is that now Amalek steps in, and he is always given the job of pushing us to tshuva. That's not pretty, but it is the guarantee of the system. In the end of the day, it's the guarantee of the system, because Hashem won't abandon us. And abandoning us would mean letting us go off in our free choice to a place where we could no longer be redeemed. That's the 50th level of Tumah. That's the whole Mitzrayim story. Hashem doesn't do that, whether it's through miraculous intervention in the positive sense or miraculous intervention in the negative sense. There will always be an intervention that will prevent us from sliding too far out of our lane. The lane has to bring us to tshuva and redemption. So that's Amalek's role, and don't get used to it. You say, well, how do we avoid getting angry? And the answer is by recognizing that those small vexations are a gift in order to keep us as a reminder that Hashem is in the picture. And of course, when something goes positively, that is certainly not to be ignored, and we use it in order to be able to move forward. So that is as far as the role of Amalek is concerned. I think that we need to recall the pasuk in Mishlei. The pasuk says, "Birtzos Hashem darkei ish, gam oyuvov yashlim ito." When Hashem is pleased with the path, doesn't mean the arrival, with the path that a person is on, his enemies make peace with him. That means that the default, the Breirat Mechdal, the default in the world is that we are surrounded with enemies. That's the default. When we are on the right path, so then there is a miraculous intervention. Biritzos Hashem darkei ish gam oyvov yashlim ito. There's going to be this positive intervention, but we shouldn't think of it in the reverse, where we're sort of on a good road, we're doing okay, and then we have to start getting worried when our enemies show their fangs. Our enemies show their fangs. Of course, we're supposed to worry about that, but worrying about that means that we're picking it up pretty late in the game. It's still a gift. It still gives us the opportunity to recall that Hashem is Avinu Malkeinu. Again, Avinu Malkeinu means we're always either saying thank you or asking. We're always either in a state of requesting from Hashem or saying thank you to Hashem. Those are both parts of the Avinu and Malkeinu system. I suppose that as an aside, and maybe we'll end with this, is that tshuva, this process that we're describing, preceded the creation of the world. Now, be careful of that, right? B'terem harim yuladu, v'techolel eretz v'sevel, v'tomer shuvu b'nei adam. And you say, shuvu b'nei adam, before there were people, before there was a world, before there were mountains, before there, what is that? What is the meaning of that? Are those the chelkei atshuva of charata and azivas hachet and kabbalah la'asi, the vidui? Like, what does that mean? That there was tshuva, and the answer is ma'ona tahi salanu b'dar b'dar. We were already resident next to a Kadosh Baruch Hu in the pre our existence, before our existence, and we are always being called on to restore our connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's the reason, to make that meaningful, is the reason why the world was created. Because people who are static, those are malachim. They're static. They're not in a process of coming closer to Hashem. They are static. They're considered omdim. They're static. But the creation of the world required, therefore, that there would be forces that would distance us from Hashem, and that the purpose of the world would be to utilize it in order to come closer. Excuse me. So whenever we are looking at a story where something terribly wrong is going on, and the anti-Semitism in the 30s that Savta is describing, I don't think we need to go looking too far to see the reemergence of that in the world today. And it is for that reason that we are meant to regard and relate to the negativity of the world as being, oh, we're in a state that allows the sonim to bear their fangs, and that means that Hashem is calling us closer. So that process started before there was a world, before anybody did any averos, before anybody had to do the chelkei tshuva of the Rambam. There was a process called tshuva, which is to get back to the closeness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, back to the sense of HaKadosh Baruch Hu being the Melech and the Av. That process is the reason for creation, as opposed to being somehow a trip up in the process. And as soon as there won't be a need for us to have Amalek on our case, because we are coming closer to Hashem ourselves, immediately Amalek will be obliterated. Because once the throne of Hashem, once we're approaching the throne of Hashem, Amalek will no longer have a role in the world, because their only role is to serve as Shevet Evrato, to serve as his staff, to be able to prod us back to where we need to go. If anybody wants to unmute themselves and comment, question, reaction, that's great. I won't take up more of your time otherwise. I think you're all able to unmute yourselves, right? Just confirm that. Yes, everybody is allowed to unmute themselves if they wish to, and we will otherwise pause. Good. In that case, I wish you a successful week, Be'ezer Hashem. We should share Besaros Tovos.
Man, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.